Hi everyone, this is Garrison for Iron Kingdoms at War, bringing you another terrain tutorial. This time I'm going to show you how to make a swamp or a marshland piece of terrain, area terrain for your War Machine gaming board. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to use a combination of spackling and some Envirotex water effects, some sand and grit for texture, some twigs from your backyard, some pebbles, and we're going to make a really nice looking piece of terrain in the end from, odds and ends, which is always the fun of making terrain, is taking a bunch of junk and turn it into a pretty cool piece of scenery for your wargaming board. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the materials you're going to need to start. Alright, so I'm going to use a hardboard base for my swamp. This hardboard base is about 8 to 9 inches across this way and 6 or 7 inches this way. It can be any size you want, just something prominent enough that it is something that has to be dealt with on your gaming board. If you make it too small, then people just avoid the terrain and it really is not a functional piece. This is going to be a neat looking piece, but I want it to be an effective gaming piece as well, as far as it impacts play when the swamp is on the board. Alright, so anyway, what we need to realize is that in the end we're going to use a pour-on water effect. Envirotex is what I like. It's really a high gloss sealer rather than a water effect per se, but it actually does the job quite beautifully. So, but what we're going to do is we're going to start with this piece of hardboard that I've pre-cut. If you don't have access to something like this, you could use a piece of matting board and just cut that with scissors to shape, but it needs to be something that can hold up to moisture, because we're going to put some a rosin type material on here later, and if this is wet, then you're going to have a problem. If it's something less, if it's something flexible like cardboard or whatnot, it's going to bend and curl and it's going to be a mess. So you want something nice and stable, MDF or hardboard for your base. Anyway, let's get on with the video. What I'm going to do is, first thing I need to do is I need to build up an area around this thing that's going to kind of create the area that surrounds the pool of swampy water. So one of my favorite materials, of course, is spackle. As you all call it in the UK, it's filler, right? So this is Drydex, goes on pink, dries white. That way we know we're ready to move on to the next step when it dries. So very simply what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically on the perimeter of this piece, I'm going to build up a kind of reservoir by making an embankment. And so we just kind of go around, and what I need to make sure is that I give the edge of this some depth, because if I don't and I go to pour on my Envirotex later and this is not an actual barrier, I am going to have a runoff of mess before I even know what's happened. So I need to build up kind of an embankment around this. It also gives kind of a nice just edge to the terrain piece and establishes kind of where that edge is. Alright, so see, I'm a little thin in this area. Do not want a disaster when it's rosin pouring time, so got to build that up. This all looks very smooth. In the end, we're going to texture this up. Alright, and so that you'll see it's much more natural looking. But for right now, again, we're just kind of building a reservoir for our swamp. Okay. Now I'm going to continue going around here and kind of speed things up on the camera. Okay, so as you can see, I've built up my embankment around this piece. Because this is going to be a swamp and not a pond, and you can traverse it, it's not so deep that you can't go through it, I'm going to pick a couple of areas where I'm just going to build it up a little bit towards the embankment. Right, and that way it just will look a little bit more natural in the end. So just pick a couple of places where I'm just going to have this embankment kind of run in, just to give it more of an irregularity. Okay. And again, in the end, this looks like a pink mess right now, but in the end, it's going to look like something once we texture it up and so forth and so on. What you want to look for now is just you want it smooth. You don't want any protruding bits. All right, and you just want to eye it and make sure you've really got a reservoir that will hold up when you pour stuff in. So if you see any shallow points in your embankment around the edge, fill that in now. So that's now that that's drying, what we want to do during this stage is add some fun details. Right, so one thing we're going to add are some trees, like some fallen trees in the swampy area. I just grabbed some twigs that came from an oak tree in my backyard, and so just go outside, grab some twigs or whatnot, and you've got some scenic material. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break these up, and they're going to represent kind of fallen trees. All right, so I'm going to grab my glue. So what we're going to do is kind of put these so that they've fallen into this swampy area. Maybe this was once a forest and now it's been inundated with water, so the roots aren't holding firm. I'm just going to kind of lay these around from the embankment into the water. Now what I can do is get my glue going, my weld bond. I'm just going to apply some glue to the bottom of this tree here, and then I'm going to go like that, and what I'm going to do is what's going to seal the other end of this, let me get it more on camera here, what's going to seal the other end of this is I'm going to push this into my spackle, alright, so that it's anchored here by the spackle and anchored there by the glue. Alright, so add a couple more twigs just for some more fallen trees. Alright, sometimes when you take these twigs apart, you get the bark, which is more of a paper type material on these little twigs, starts to come off, and that's fine. You can help it along. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more bits and pieces, okay, to my swamp, and just do it by eye. I really didn't need to glue there because I put it in the spackle. In fact, I'm going to clean that up a little bit. So I don't have a glob of glue there. Okay, there we go. Alright, and so maybe one more. Something with branches. Ooh, I like this piece. Alright, so again, twigs from outside are going to do the job just fine. And they're going to give you a nice fallen debris here. That gives this piece a little more character, which will be nice. Don't overdo it, because if you have too much stuff in here, it's going to be hard for miniatures to actually get through here. But that's basically the idea. The other thing we can do while the spackle's still drying is we can add some stones. I've got my cheap aquarium stones here. I'm just going to take a handful and find some pieces that I fancy that look like they'd be in the swamp here. I'm going to plop them right into the spackling, and they will just hold in place in that stuff. Alright, so again, get some variation in size and texture. I always picture kind of smooth stones being near water sources, so that's something you want to do. But basically I've got 6 or 7 stones on here, and that's enough. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want them to become the focus of the piece, but basically yeah, that's the swamp kind of ready to go. We are going to add some texture to this once the surrounding area has dried. You might actually add some other little special effects, which we'll talk about in a second, but I'm going to let this dry off camera, and then we'll come back to it and talk about the next step.